The Clone Wars should have lasted several years. Unfortunately for Darth Sidious, Mace Windu found a magnet 3 days after Geonosis and began asking practical questions. The Battle of Geonosis had ended. The Republic had an army it had never ordered. The Jedi had become generals without discussing it, and several thousand battle droids had demonstrated that standing in neat rows was not a sound defensive strategy. 3 days later, Mace Windu called an emergency meeting of the Jedi Council. He entered carrying a large industrial magnet taken from a Geonosian loading crane. No one asked why. That was the first mistake. A damaged B-2 super battle droid stood in the center of the council chamber. Its weapons had been removed, though it remained active and visibly irritated about the situation. Mace pointed at it. "This machine represents the principal military strength of the Confederacy." Obi-Wan folded his hands. A somewhat reduced example, but yes. Mace lifted the magnet. "This represents the end of the war." He threw it. The magnet struck the B-2 in the chest, locked onto its armor, and pulled the droid sideways into one of the chamber's support columns. The droid's feet scraped across the floor, its shoulder crushed against the stone, and it attempted to raise one arm. It failed, announcing, "Unfair." Mace looked around the council chamber. "They are machines." No one replied. "They are machines," he repeated. "We possess starships capable of crossing the galaxy. We possess reactors capable of powering entire cities. We possess weapons capable of cutting through armored hulls." He pointed at the droid pinned helplessly against the wall. "Why the fuck are we fighting them individually?" Ki-Adi-Mundi leaned forward. "Because they arrive individually." Mace replies, "They arrive by the million." Ki-Adi-Mundi says, "Then we fight 1 million individual battles." Mace stared at him. The room remained quiet. There are moments when Mace Windu appears angry. This was not one of them. Anger still requires hope. Mace retrieved a datapad. An electromagnetic pulse could disable their processors, communications, targeting systems, weapons, vehicles, and orbital support simultaneously. Obi-Wan considered this. "That sounds extremely useful." "It is," Mace says. "Do we possess such a weapon?" Obi-Wan asks. "We possess several methods." The council relaxed slightly. Then Mace continued. "The fastest method requires detonating low-yield nuclear devices in the upper atmosphere." The council stopped relaxing. Yoda's ears lowered. "Nuclear device, what is?" Mace slowly turned toward him. Mace initially believed Yoda was testing him. Yoda was not testing him. Ki-Adi-Mundi had never heard of nuclear fission. Plo Koon understood fusion reactors, but assumed radiation was a type of poisonous fog. Saisi Teen believed an electromagnetic pulse was a specialized Jedi meditation technique. Even Piel asked whether the weapon required a crystal. Anakin, who had been invited because he happened to be standing outside, raised his hand. "What is science?" Obi-Wan closed his eyes. "Please leave." "I was invited." Anakin crossed his arms. Obi-Wan sighs. "You followed me." The door was open. Anakin replies. Mace slams both his hands on the council table and began explaining. He explained atoms, radiation, magnetic fields, electrical systems, atmospheric detonation, shielding, and why striking every battle droid with a separate lightsaber was not the only available military strategy. The explanation lasted 4 hours. By the second hour, Ki-Adi-Mundi was taking notes. By the third, Plo Koon had begun asking thoughtful questions about shielding Republic medical facilities. By the fourth, Mace had drawn 17 diagrams and developed a level of enthusiasm the Council had never witnessed from him. He was smiling. This alarmed everyone more than the nuclear weapons. Mace pointed to the final diagram. The pulse spreads across the operational region. Shielded Republic equipment survives. Separatist systems fail. Their army stops moving. Yoda raised one hand. "Do this! You may." Mace nodded. "Excellent. Stop speaking, you must, Yoda said, barely awake. Mace lowered the pointer. We still require a nuclear device. Obi-Wan looked toward the Republic Armaments Registry. Surely one exists somewhere in the core. Not in this configuration. Modern galactic weapons are too refined. We require something primitive, inefficient, and powerful enough to produce a wide electromagnetic disturbance. The Council considered this. Then everyone looked at Anakin. Anakin noticed. No. Mace approached him. Skywalker, you will acquire one. Anakin frowned. From where? I do not know, Mace replied. Anakin stared at him. You are assigning me to steal a weapon that no one can locate? You wish to prove that you deserve greater responsibility. I meant command of additional troops. This is additional responsibility. Anakin hesitated. Will this make me a master? Mace paused. It will be considered. Anakin glanced at Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan examined the ceiling. Yoda offered his usual assistance. Meditate upon the answer, you should. Anakin sighed. Yoda's advice was technically valid. It was also the answer Yoda gave whenever he did not possess an actual answer, which was often enough to become suspicious. Still, Anakin went to meditate, mostly because every other option involved listening to Mace explain atoms again. Anakin entered an empty meditation chamber beneath the temple. He sat down and closed his eyes. He reached into the Force and asked for guidance. Nothing happened. He asked again. Still nothing. He changed the wording, asking the Force to show him a powerful primitive weapon. Nothing. Then he asked the Force to help him become a master. The chamber vanished immediately. Anakin opened his eyes inside an underground corridor constructed from bare concrete and steel. The lights flickered overhead, and warning signs covered the walls in a language his Jedi training had never encountered. Several armed men stared at him. Anakin stared back. One of them shouted, and Anakin raised both hands. I do not understand you. The men raised their weapons. Anakin ignited his lightsaber. The weapons fired small metal projectiles rather than blaster bolts. Anakin deflected the first group, cut 3 rifles in half, pulled the remaining weapons from their owners, and pinned everyone gently against the wall. Gently, in this case, meant no permanent injuries. Probably. He examined the nearest damaged rifle. Primitive combustion weapon. Steel construction. Chemical propellant. No plasma chamber. No power cell. Anakin looked around. This may actually be the correct place. He stepped into the next corridor and found a directory. His comlink attempted to translate it. The translation was poor. Restricted strategic storage. The comlink rendered this as secret bombs. Proceed right. Anakin looked upward. The Force has provided a sign. He followed the arrow. Alarms began sounding and more guards arrived. Anakin disarmed them, sealed 2 blast doors, removed a security camera from the ceiling, and continued through the facility while insisting to himself that he was avoiding unnecessary harm. The guards did not appear convinced. Eventually, Anakin reached a steel door labeled with several warnings. A single padlock secured it. The facility possessed reinforced concrete, armed patrols, sealed ventilation, and enough surveillance equipment to observe every corridor. Yet the final door had 1 padlock. Security is rarely defeated by brilliance. It usually defeats itself shortly before brilliance arrives. Anakin pulled the lock away with the Force. The door opened, the lights activated, and inside were 452 compact nuclear warheads stored in orderly rows. Anakin remained silent for several seconds. Then he smiled. The mission had succeeded. Unfortunately, the mission had not included transportation. Anakin sat on top of the nearest warhead and attempted to meditate himself back to Coruscant. He reached into the Force, concentrating on the Jedi Temple, the Council Chamber, and Mace Windu being forced to acknowledge his success. Nothing happened. Anakin opened one eye. Perhaps Jocasta Nu was correct about meditation. The universe remained silent. That was not praise. a blue rupture suddenly appeared across the storage room. The portal widened, and every warhead lifted from the floor. Anakin grabbed the casing beneath him as the entire stockpile vanished. Several moments later, all 452 warheads fell through the ceiling of the Jedi archives. Shelves collapsed, datapads scattered, and an ancient bust of Master Odan Ur lost its head. Jocasta Nu's cataloging cart disappeared beneath 6 tons of stolen terrestrial ordnance. No younglings were injured, though several learned new vocabulary from Jocasta. Anakin landed on top of the pile just as Mace Windu entered the archives. Mace surveyed the collapsed shelves, scattered records, and 452 stolen nuclear warheads. He nodded once. Took you long enough. Anakin climbed down from the pile. There are 452? I can count, Mace replied. Anakin brushed dust from his robes. Can I be a master now? No. You said it would be considered? I have considered it. Anakin waited. And? You must complete the operation. Anakin glanced back at the warheads. What operation? Mace handed him a deployment order. Sanctioned planetary electromagnetic attacks against Separatist military targets. Anakin read the first page, then slowly looked up. These appear to be war crimes. Not after the Senate approves them. Anakin lowered the datapad. Have I committed unsanctioned ones? Mace stared at him. Anakin looked away. Hypothetically. The Jedi transferred the weapons to a specially modified Venator. Its command systems, engines, and communications were completely shielded. Every clone on board received an insulated helmet liner and strict instructions not to touch exposed conduits. Admiral Yularen reviewed the operation plan twice, then reviewed his resignation options. There were none. The campaign was designated Operation Blackout. Mace disliked the name. Anakin liked it. This caused Mace to dislike it more. The first target was Raxus Secundus, not the cities or the civilian districts, but an isolated region containing Separatist communications relays, droid command centers, and enough automated defenses to repel a conventional invasion. The Venator entered the system, and Separatist fighters launched. Anakin personally released the first warhead into the upper atmosphere. The detonation produced a flash, followed by absolute silence. Every droid fighter stopped responding. Several continued forward in straight lines until gravity resolved the matter. On the surface, command towers went dark. Turbo lasers lowered, battle droids froze, and tanks rolled to a stop. One tactical droid completed half a sentence and remained that way for the rest of the war. The Republic landed without resistance. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Mace reviewed the results. Acceptable. Anakin removed his flight gloves. We captured a major command region without losing a single clone. Correct, Mace replied. Anakin studied his expression. You might sound pleased. I am pleased. You look exactly the same. This is how I look when pleased. Anakin paused. That explains several things. Operation Blackout expanded. Mace insisted on controlled detonations over military regions. The Senate insisted on calling every affected region a military region. Those were not the same policy. Within days, Separatist factory worlds lost power, shipyards shut down, orbital defenses failed, and automated mines stopped recognizing targets. Droid garrisons froze by the million. The Republic began winning battles without firing. At first, the Jedi celebrated. Then reports arrived from the surface. Civilian grids had also failed. Transit systems stopped, weather controls shut down, and hospitals switched to emergency reserves. Entire cities discovered that relying upon centralized electronics for every basic service had been a questionable decision. Mace ordered relief deployments after every strike. The Senate reduced the relief budget and increased funding for additional warheads. Mace objected. The Senate praised his innovation. He objected more firmly. The Senate awarded him a medal. This was not the direction he had intended. But the war was ending, quickly. Far too quickly for one particular chancellor. Count Dooku received the first warning when every light in his command chamber turned off. His holotable vanished, his communications failed, and his lightsaber refused to ignite. He stood alone in the darkness for several moments. Then General Grievous fell over. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled most of Grievous's mechanical body while leaving his organic organs fully conscious. This produced a difficult situation. Grievous lay motionless on the floor, coughing with tremendous anger. Dooku attempted to lift him with the Force, but Grievous weighed considerably more than he appeared. After several unsuccessful attempts, Dooku dragged him onto a chair. Grievous remained there, staring furiously at the wall. Dooku tried contacting Darth Sidious through encrypted channels, but there were no encrypted channels. There were no channels at all, and there was barely a functioning door. For warmth, Dooku used small bursts of force lightning to ignite pieces of furniture. This worked, though every discharge also made Grievous twitch. "Stop doing that," Grievous said through a failing vocoder. Dooku replied, "You are fortunate I have not left you on the floor." "I would prefer the floor," moaned Grievous. Qui-Gon Jinn appeared beside the fire. Dooku looked at his former apprentice. Qui-Gon looked at the ruined chamber, the disabled general, and the pieces of expensive furniture being burned for heat. "This is beneath you," smirked Jinn. Dooku sighed. "I am aware." "You joined the Sith for this?" Jinn inquired. "I was promised order," Dooku said. Grievous's hand jerked against the chair. Dooku glanced toward him. "The promise was inaccurate." Across Separatist territory, the same problem repeated. Battle droids could not fight, commanders could not communicate, banking systems failed, and factories stopped. The Techno-Union attempted to develop shielding, but its primary laboratories had already lost power. Wat Tambor issued a statement through a manually operated transmitter, but no one received it. The Separatists had prepared for clone invasions, Jedi attacks, orbital bombardments, blockades, espionage, and betrayal. They had not prepared for the Republic to switch everything off. By the end of the week, the Confederacy controlled hundreds of worlds and could reliably communicate with 6 of them. Palpatine watched the war collapsing from his office on Coruscant. He had spent decades constructing this conflict, and Mace Windu was ending it with an object found beside a loading crane. That could not be permitted. Palpatine summoned the Jedi Council and praised Mace's strategy, which immediately made Mace suspicious. The Chancellor then presented intelligence identifying Mustafar as the last major Separatist command center still operating. The intelligence was fabricated. The Separatist leadership had not yet gathered there, but Palpatine simply knew they eventually might, which was apparently close enough for government work. He requested one final strike, and Anakin would command it. The Council agreed because the war could end within the day. Palpatine personally inspected the shielded Venator before departure. He examined the launch controls and complimented the engineering. Then, while everyone watched Anakin demonstrate the loading system, Palpatine used the Force to damage one guidance relay. "Good fortune, General Skywalker," he said. Anakin smiled. "When I return, the Council will make its decision." "I am certain they will," smirked Palpatine. Mustafar's defenses were stronger than expected. Droid fighters swarmed the Venator, and orbital cannons fired from shielded platforms. The launch crew loaded the final warhead, but the damaged relay locked it inside the deployment rack. Anakin rushed to the launch chamber. The weapon was lodged halfway between the armored doors. A clone technician examined the controls. "The release mechanism is dead, General." "Then I will move it manually," he said excitedly. "That weapon weighs several tons," retorted the clone trooper. "I have moved heavier things," Anakin says assuredly. "Intentionally?" The clone hesitated. Anakin did not answer. He climbed onto the deployment rack and reached into the Force. The warhead shifted, and the damaged mechanism broke free. Unfortunately, so did the entire rack. The same blue rupture that had brought the weapons from Earth opened beneath Anakin. He looked down. No, The warhead dropped through, and Anakin followed. The bomb emerged exactly where it was meant to go, high above the Separatist defenses. Anakin did not. He appeared several kilometers below it, directly above a Mustafarian lava bank, and fell. The warhead detonated overhead. The electromagnetic pulse spread flawlessly across the planet, shutting down the Separatist defenses. The shielded Venator remained functional. The mission was a complete success, except for Anakin. The Venator located Anakin after the fighting ended. His injuries were severe, his robes had burned away, his lungs were damaged, and several medical droids recommended that he stop attempting to speak. He survived. Barely. Anakin spent weeks inside a Bacta tank while Republic surgeons constructed respiratory equipment and mechanical supports. The Chancellor visited every day. No one found this unusual, though they should have. When Anakin was ready to leave the medical center, Palpatine presented him with a sealed black suit. It included armored prosthetics, environmental controls, a respirator, and a long cape with no identifiable medical purpose. Anakin examined it. "You already possessed this?" "A contingency," Palpatine said. Anakin huffed. "For whom?" "A servant who might suffer injuries while fulfilling his destiny." Anakin stared at him. Palpatine smiled, and Anakin decided the answer was probably ceremonial. The suit was comfortable, and the cape was unnecessary, but effective. More importantly, it was black. Anakin approved. The Clone Wars ended 2 weeks later. The remaining Separatist worlds surrendered. Count Dooku was captured while attempting to recharge his communications equipment with Force lightning. General Grievous was recovered from his chair and placed in Republic storage because no one could decide whether he qualified as a prisoner, a weapon, or damaged equipment. The Senate declared Operation Blackout a triumph of Republic ingenuity. Mace Windu received 6 additional medals, placing all of them in a drawer. A droid kept trying to frame them and present them to Mace. Anakin Skywalker entered the council chamber wearing black armor and breathing loudly enough to interrupt Ki-Adi-Mundi's thoughts. Yoda announced the decision. "Proven yourself you have. The rank of Master granted to you is." Anakin looked toward Mace. Mace remained perfectly still. "Master Windu?" Mace stood. He opened his mouth, but nothing emerged. He sat down again, then slowly lowered his head onto the council table. The medical report listed the cause as acute spiritual exhaustion. Anakin took his seat. "Does this mean I inherit his responsibilities?" Obi-Wan looked at Mace, then at Anakin, and finally toward the nearest exit. "No." Palpatine was left with a damaged conspiracy, a mechanized chosen one who had received everything he wanted, and a republic that no longer needed emergency wartime powers. For the first time in decades, Darth Sidious had no immediate plan. He blamed the magnet, Dooku blamed electrical engineering, and Grievous blamed everyone. And Mace Windu never appeared as a Force ghost. Some believed he had become one with the Force. Others believed he had simply refused to attend another council meeting containing Master Anakin Skywalker. Both explanations were equally credible. This has been Canon Chaos.